Hello guys, and welcome to this edition of AI Governance Engineering with myself, Gavin. Today we're going to go deep on a topic that's going to catch a lot of organizations off guard. I'm calling it the AI Explainability Gap. So in some of my recent videos, I introduced ISO 6254 and some reasons as to why it matters. Today I'm going to show you exactly how this standard addresses the gap, what it gets right, and where it honestly falls short. So let me paint you a picture. Imagine you get a letter from a regulator asking you to explain how your AI-powered hiring tool decided to reject 400 applicants. And here's the problem: you didn't build the tool, you bought it from a vendor. You don't have access to the model, and you can't see inside it. And when you check the vendor's documentation, the best they can offer is the system uses advanced machine learning techniques, and that's your explanation: advanced machine learning techniques. So try handing that to a regulator, and this again is what I'm calling the AI explainability gap. And here's why this isn't such a niche problem. According to MIT Sloan and BCG research, 78% of organizations use third-party AI tools. More than half use third-party tools exclusively, and these are deployers, organizations that buy AI and don't build it. So look at these numbers. 55% of all AI failures come from third-party tools. Only 24% of organizations properly govern their third-party AI, and 44% have teams deploying AI without even involving security or governance groups. So the vast majority of the market is deploying AI they didn't build, can't see inside, and aren't governing properly, and they're about to be held legally responsible for explaining it. Because the EU AI Act is very clear about what deployers of high-risk AI systems must do, Article 26 lays out 6 key obligations, and every single one depends on being able to explain what the system is doing. You need to use systems per provider instructions, which basically means understanding them. You need to assign competent human oversight personnel who can correctly interpret the system's output. You need to monitor for risks, keep logs for 6 months, conduct fundamental rights impact assessments, and inform affected individuals about AI-driven decisions. So the compliance deadline is August 2nd, 2026, give or take. So that's roughly around 4 months away. And all of this depends on the quality of information your AI vendor gives you. So this is the visual I want you to remember. The AI explainability supply chain. You've got the general purpose AI provider who builds the foundational model, and they have the most information. Then the system provider who builds the application on top. Then the deployer who uses it. And finally the end user or AI subject who's affected by the decisions. Now look at the explainability bar at the bottom. It shrinks at every handoff. The provider knows the most, the deployer knows much less, and the end user, the person whose loan was denied or whose job application was rejected, knows almost nothing. And here's the irony: the deployer is the one who faces the regulator and the end user. They have the least information but the most accountability. And there's a trap here that most people don't seem to be aware of. Article 25 of the EU AI Act says that if you do any of these 3 things, like put your name or trademark on a high-risk AI system, or make a substantial modification, or repurpose a general purpose AI for high-risk use, you automatically become a provider, not a deployer, a provider, with all the heavier provider obligations. Many organizations don't realize this reclassification risk exists. You might think you're just deploying someone else's AI, but the way you're using it could make you legally a provider. So enter ISO 6254, published in September 2025, and around 76 pages long. Now this document does 3 things that nobody in the AI governance space is really talking about or giving much attention to. First, it identifies 11 distinct stakeholder types, each needing fundamentally different explanations. Second, it maps explainability across the entire AI lifecycle, from inception to retirement, not just at deployment. And third, it provides a property taxonomy that turns the vague requirement "make it explainable" into something you can actually specify, assess, and audit. So let's start with the stakeholder taxonomy in clause 6. This is probably the most valuable thing in the entire standard. Look at these 5 stakeholder types. An AI user, like a judge using a bail risk tool, who wants reassurance that the decisions are appropriate and wants to justify their own actions. An AI developer wants to detect biases and spurious correlations. An AI provider wants to build trust and comply with legal requirements. An AI subject, the person affected by the decision, needs to understand why a specific decision was made about them in language they can comprehend and potentially contest. And a regulator needs to verify compliance across an entire market sector. The standard identifies 11 types in total, including platform providers, system integrators, data providers, evaluators, and auditors, and each one has different explainability objectives. And this is the key insight that makes 6254 so important. A SHAP plot that satisfies a developer is incomprehensible to an AI subject whose loan was denied. A natural language explanation that satisfies a customer is insufficient for a regulator conducting market surveillance. You cannot have one explanation that serves everyone. Now here's something, again, not many people are talking about or connecting. ISO 42001 Control A.8.4 requires organizations to provide information to interested parties about AI system interactions, but A.8.4 doesn't tell you how to figure out what different interested parties actually need. ISO 6254 Clause 6 fills exactly that gap. It's the implementation pathway for A84, and I haven't seen much content anywhere that makes this connection. The second thing 6254 does is map explainability across the entire AI system lifecycle in Clause 7. Most organizations only think about explainability at deployment. When a regulator asks questions or a customer complains, ISO 6254 says that's far too late. You need to consider explainability at inception. That's where you identify what stakeholders need. At design and development, that's where you build the explainability component. At verification and validation, that's where you test whether your explanations actually work. At deployment, that's where provider to deployer documentation matters. Through operation, continuous validation, re-evaluation, and even retirement, because you may need to retain explainability artifacts for legal purposes. For deployers specifically, the critical stages are inception, where you define what explanations you need from your vendor before you buy, and deployment, where you verify that what the vendor provides actually meets your needs. If you don't specify explainability requirements in your procurement process, you've already lost. The third contribution is the property taxonomy in Clause 8. Now this is what turns the abstract requirement, make your AI explainable, into something concrete and accessible. The taxonomy covers 6 key properties. Audience expertise. Is the person a data scientist or a member of the public? Scope. Do you need to explain the whole model's behavior or just this specific decision? Completeness. Full causation chain or just the top factors? Depth. Surface level or deeper reasoning path, and this is a critical distinction the standard makes between rationale and justification. A rationale identifies causes that actually affected the decision process. A justification identifies causes that are relevant without claiming they were the actual causes. Most AI explanations today provide justifications, not rationales. And finally, form. Is it numeric, visual, textual, structured, example-based, or interactive? So here's what this looks like in practice. If you're deploying an AI credit scoring system, you could use this or a similar taxonomy to write a specification card. For the AI subject, the loan applicant, you specify low expertise audience, local scope, meaning just this decision, textual form, meaning plain language, justification, level depth, and top 3 inferencing factors for completeness. Now that's quite actionable. You can put that in a vendor contract. You can test against it. You can audit it. Make it explainable is not actionable. This is the difference 6254 makes. Now connect this back to the EU AI Act. Article 13 requires providers to supply information that enables deployers to interpret AI system outputs. But Article 13 doesn't specify the format, depth, or scope. This taxonomy gives you the vocabulary to specify exactly what you need. Now, to be completely honest, ISO 6254 has some limitations, and remarkably, the standard itself acknowledges them in Annex C. Annex C.2 warns about 4 cognitive biases that explainability can actually trigger confirmation bias. People see an explanation that matches their expectations and assume it's correct. Over-interpretation, drawing conclusions beyond what the explanation supports. What the standard calls a bore a vacuum. Humans would rather have a wrong understanding than admit they don't understand. And misinterpretation, the explanation isn't precise enough and gets read differently than intended. The standard also warns about what it calls placebo explanations, explanations that look impressive with lots of numbers and charts, but don't actually reflect what the AI system did. The mere presence of numbers in an application creates unwarranted trust, even when those numbers are meaningless. So think about that. The standard itself is warning you that producing explanations can create a false sense of understanding, and that's worse than having no explanation at all. So there are 3 more limitations to flag. First, the persuasion risk from Annex 6.3. AI producers are incentivized to make explanations persuasive rather than faithful because they want you to adopt their system. Deployers rely on these provider-generated explanations, which creates an inherent conflict of interest. The people producing the explanations benefit from them being reassuring, not necessarily accurate. Second, the security trade-off from Annex C.4. Making AI more explainable can make it more vulnerable. Detailed explanations give adversaries information for adversarial attacks, model extraction, or circumventing fraud detection. Regulators want maximum explainability. Security teams want minimum disclosure. And the standard flags this tension but doesn't resolve it. And third, there's an LLM-shaped hole in the standard. Clause 9's methods, SHAP, LIME, inherently interpretable models, were designed for traditional machine learning. For the LLMs that most organizations are actually deploying right now, ChatGPT, Claude, etc., these models simply don't work. ISO 6254 gives you the framework for who needs explanations and what properties those explanations should have, but it doesn't give you the methods for achieving it with LLMs, and the science of LLM explainability is years away from being production ready. So where does this leave you? So here are 5 things deployers should do right now. Number 1, use Clause 6 to map your stakeholder landscape. Before you worry about methods and tools, identify every stakeholder type that needs explanations from your AI systems. Write down what they actually need to understand. This costs nothing and it's the most impactful thing you can do. Number 2, build explainability requirements into procurement. Use Clause 8's taxonomy to specify what explanations your vendors must provide. Scope, form, depth, completeness. Put it in the contract. If the vendor can't tell you what explanation capabilities their system has, then that's a big red flag. Number 3, apply the lifecycle lens at inception, not deployment. Before you deploy a new AI system, walk through Clause 7 stages. Have we considered explainability at inception, at deployment, during operation? Number 4, map to your existing ISO 42001 controls. Connect 6254 directly to control A84 and also to ISO 42005's explainability impact objective at section 5828 and to ISO 23894 objective A12. So nobody else is really making these connections, which means you'll be ahead of the auditor. And number 5, be honest about the LLM gap. If you're deploying LLMs in high-risk contexts, document the explainability limitations, show that you've assessed the gap, identified the risks, and implemented compensating controls. An auditor will respect documented honesty over fabricated explanations. ISO 6254 isn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. It doesn't solve the LLL problem, it doesn't eliminate the deployer gap, and it openly acknowledges that explanations can backfire, but it does something nobody else in the AI governance space has done. It provides a structured, stakeholder-aware, lifecycle-integrated framework for thinking about explainability. And right now, with the EU AI Act high-risk deadline only a few months away, that framework is more valuable than any SHAP plot. So that's all for today, folks. If you found this useful, please like and subscribe. Drop a comment if you want me to go deeper on any of these clauses, or if you want to see how 6254 maps to specific EU AI Act deployer obligations. So I'm Gavin, and this is AI Governance Engineering, and until next time, I'll see you again.